Okay, so what I want to focus on now is kind of an introduction to the second section of the course. Essentially, what we're going to try to do in this second section of the course is derive the demand curve and derive the supply curve and give you a brief introduction to the types of firms that exist. So in Chapter 9 of these, let's see, there are 4 chapters for this section. Of these 4, this is the hardest chapter. I will stress it again, this is the hardest chapter of all of them. It essentially is going to look deeper at the issue of why the demand curve is downward sloping. And we're going to do that with a series of graphs. So this will probably be a video that you'll want to watch several times. Following this chapter, we're going to look at a technology and cost curve, which will allow us to derive the supply curve. And then following that, we're going to look at 2 types of ways that firms exist. The one being perfect competition, that would be there are many buyers and sellers, and then a kind of a less extreme example called monopolistic competition, where there are many firms and consumers, but they sell slightly differentiated products. So with only 4 chapters, what that means is that we'll have a quiz after the next chapter, chapter 10, I believe, and after that, we'll have the exam after the 4th chapter on monopolistic competition. Okay, so as we start off this issue of deriving the demand curve, Chapter 9, essentially what the chapter is called is consumer choice and behavior. So, to sort of motivate this issue, there's this paradox known as the diamond water paradox, which basically was this issue that troubled economists in the late 1800s, in the 19th century. The issue that diamonds are very expensive, but they're not very useful, right? Unless you're cutting stuff or, where you would use the diamonds in a cutting tool. Diamonds don't serve much of a purpose, but they're very expensive. Water is incredibly cheap, yet we know it to be essential for life. So the issue was, why is this the case? Why do prices, in some sense, not reflect the use value or the usefulness of the object? The reason for that, we kind of already have some hint of why this is the case, and that is this issue of marginal utility. Now, get a different marker here. What we know, right, is this issue that, what we've looked at so far, we looked at an issue where we saw that there was this law of diminishing marginal benefit, which basically said that as a person bought more and more of something, that the amount of additional happiness that they got, benefit that they got, started to fall. The example being that I used the sushi example. Well, instead of the word benefit, why don't we use the word utility? This is basically the economist's term for happiness or satisfaction. So basically what we would then say is, what is the marginal benefit or marginal utility, marginal amount of satisfaction or happiness to an additional unit of diamonds versus an additional unit of water? Well, what you can see is that because we're talking about marginal benefits and marginal utility, that what becomes important is how much of it we're actually consuming. I don't own a single diamond, right? So my marginal utility for my first diamond might be quite high, right? Because I don't own any of them, and I might just, I just might want to have some bling, right? Show it off in Menominee, show how fancy I am, and show off some of these diamonds. Water, I've got sinks full of water, right? I get free water in my apartment, right? I have lots of water. So the marginal utility is very low. The prices right? The reservation price, my maximum willingness to pay, will reflect my marginal benefit. In some sense, it's the economist's quick answer to the diamond water paradox. Diamonds are expensive because typically we own very few of them, right? And water is typically, although it's essential, is typically less expensive. And it's less expensive because we have so much of it. Now, for this term utility, typically utility is an ordinal number. An ordinal number is basically saying that things are rank ordered. So if I say that my marginal utility for the 8th sushi roll is equal to 32. There is no label here, it's just 32. That number of 32 is an ordinal number. What that means is that it's rank ordering. So all that's really important here is the magnitude of the number relative to other numbers. So if something was right, I brush my teeth with Crest. Let's say that this is the second tube of Crest, has a marginal utility of 16. If these were cardinal numbers, then this would be twice preferred to this, because right, 32 is twice the amount of 16. But that's not what utility numbers are. Utility numbers are not cardinal numbers, right? Most numbers that we deal with are cardinal numbers, right? If I have $1, that's twice as much as 50 cents, right? That's cardinal numbers. These are ordinal. All this means is that this is preferred to this. We have no idea how much more this is preferred to this. All we know is that this is preferred to this because this is a bigger number. Okay? So that's going to become important for us because, right, these utility numbers that we're calculating are unique to the individual. So, because I'm a Crest person, mine is at 16. You, on the other hand, might prefer Aquafresh, right? The one that's got all the stripes and stuff. Then obviously your own marginal utility for Crest will be quite low. So these utility numbers, or even the marginal utility numbers, they're ordinal numbers. They're unique to each person. Okay? And I can't compare my utility numbers to your utility numbers. So basically what economists would say here is that there's no interpersonal comparisons of utility. Now, what we know to be the case here are two things. First, what we know is that in terms of total utility, so that would mean total happiness from consuming each unit, all the various units of an item. What we know here is that the total utility is increasing, but at a decreasing rate. So as the quantity gets larger, as I consume more tubes of Crest toothpaste, my total utility, my total satisfaction is going to go up, but it's going to go up at an increasing rate. We know it's going to go up at an increasing rate because of the law of diminishing marginal utility. The fact that I get less and less additional satisfaction as I consume each item. So the slope of this is my marginal utility. The slope of my total utility is my marginal utility. So the slope of this is this, right? And As this line is getting flatter and flatter and flatter from left to right, this then must be falling. Now, what does that tell us, and why is that important for us? Well, what that would mean is that, going back to our very old friend, and for some of you, based on the first example, perhaps some of your enemies, one of your biggest enemy might be the demand curve. And that basically, as the Q is getting bigger, that would mean that my total utility is increasing, but my marginal utility is decreasing. Right? So as I read the demand curve left to right, as the quantity gets larger, each of these points, if I were to compare A to B, from A to B, total utility would be greater at B than it would be at A, but the marginal utility at point B would be less than the marginal utility is at point A. That's going to become important for us later. Now, let's just put some numbers behind this too, just in case you're a numbers kind of person. What we would then say, right, is that if I had quantities of an item, right, that at 0, the total utility must of course be 0. If you don't have anything, you can't have any utility. Now, there'd be no marginal utility here, so I'm just going to draw a dashed line. I could just leave it blank alternatively. Now, basically then what you would do is you would conduct surveys, you would ask people how much they value something, you would try to get some utility numbers from them. So I'm just going to make up some numbers, I'm just making them up. Don't get too upset here. Okay, so now the total satisfaction, the total utility from consuming this product is increasing. As I consume more of it, the total utility is increasing. But notice it's increasing at a decreasing rate, as is going to be measured by the marginal utility. So the difference between this and this is 10. The difference between this and this is 5. The difference between this and this is 3. And the difference between this and this is 2. What we would see is a total utility that's increasing at a decreasing rate, and a marginal utility that is decreasing. Now, what does this then mean for us? What this means for us is that the consumer then is going to be trying to get the most satisfaction that they possibly can, right? People are going to have one idea of what their goal is going to be, is that they want the most utility possible. But there's going to be a constraint. There's going to be a limitation. The limitation or the constraint is going to be the fact that I have a limited amount of income, and I have to pay a price for each product that I'm trying to buy, right? So essentially what that's going to mean then, right, is that I'm going to have to balance my utility, my satisfaction, to the cost, the actual cost of using some of my scarce income to buy the product. Now, what that's going to do is that we're going to imagine that most of the time we have more than one product that we're trying to buy. And I want to jump ahead to a rule here. And once I've shown you this rule, we're going to spend the second part of this video proving that rule to you. And we're going to prove that rule to you over 3 steps. But let me just kind of outline the rule here right now. Change marker color. I think you'll like this blue. Let's have good X and good Y. The question is, Right, if you have two goods, goods X and good Y, how much of good X will you consume, how much of good Y will you consume? That's the issue, right? So let's write out that issue. Right, the issue is how much of each do I consume? Well, the rule is going to be here. And again, we're going to prove this rule in the next part of this video. Is that I'm going to consume until the ratio of the marginal utilities is equal to the ratio of the prices. When you've done this, you're optimizing your consumption of these two goods, goods X and good Y, to maximize total utility. So when you do this, what you're doing is you're maximizing your utility subject to your income constraint. It's telling you how much to basically buy so that you can be the happiest you can at the cheapest price. So what we're going to do in part 2 of this video is start to prove this rule to you and why it makes intuitive sense why it must be this way. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video here and then we'll start with the second part of this video.